When we look at Habakkuk, we see that Habakkuk is struggling in his understanding of how God is working. And he's very honest with God, and he's asking God questions that we ask sometimes. And I really like it when we see the biblical writers as they struggle with some of the questions that we struggle with in our prayers and in our walk with God. In Habakkuk 1 verse 2, it says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry, and you will not hear?" Habakkuk is really asking the question, God, why aren't you answering my prayers? Why am I not seeing you working like I desire you to? And it's a very real question. Sometimes things don't happen the way we want them to. Sometimes our prayers don't seem to be fulfilled, and we're led to doubt, we're led to question. And so Habakkuk is asking that question, Lord, how long will I cry? How long will I pray? And you will not hear me. And God answers him to a certain extent. And then he asks a second question. In Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 13, we see the essence of that question. And he says, why do you look on those who deal treacherously and hold your tongue when the wicked devours a person more righteous than he? So now Habakkuk is struggling with, okay, you haven't answered my prayers the way I've wanted them to, the way I expect you to answer them. But then why are the wicked flourishing and the righteous seem to be having trouble? Why are things going well for those that aren't following you, but not for those that are following you? These are questions that probably most of us have asked at some point or time. Why isn't my prayer being answered? Why does it seem like everything goes wrong for those that are trying to follow you? And as I was meditating about this and thinking about this, I thought about the missionary helicopter crash or presumed crash in the Philippines. And I know people have asked me, why these were missionaries? Why did God allow this? And I don't have an answer for that. But Habakkuk was wrestling with those same questions. Why is this happening? Why does God allow this? And God then gives him a lengthy answer in chapter 2. But what I really want to come to is chapter 3, verses 1 and 2 of Habakkuk. Because Habakkuk here, while he doesn't understand the answer to his questions, he accepts God's sovereignty. He accepts that God is the ruler and is in charge no matter what. And I want to notice what he says here in Habakkuk 3, verses 1 and 2. A prayer of Habakkuk the prophet on Shigionoth. O Lord, I have heard your speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. And so here we find Habakkuk's prayer. We have his questioning of God in chapter 1, God's answer in chapter 2. And then we have Habakkuk's prayer of surrender and submission in chapter 3. But what I find most interesting is what he prays for. He says, O Lord, I have heard your speech and was afraid. I have seen your greatness. I have seen your awesomeness, and it filled me with awe and wonder. The answer to our questions is generally not our questions being answered, but the answer to our questions is seeing God in his glory lifted up. And Habakkuk could simply say, I've heard your speech. I was afraid. I realized how much greater you are than me, and my questions are stilled. But then he has a specific prayer. O Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. Habakkuk says, Lord, I don't understand these questions that I have, but I'm going to accept them. I'm going to accept you as the one in charge. I'm going to accept you as my God. And then he has his petition. Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. And I believe that in our lives today, we can struggle with questions that we don't understand. And that's okay to struggle in our prayers and our seek to understand with God. But we need to come to the point where we see God for who he is. Not that we're ever fully going to grasp completely, but at least we recognize his awesomeness, his glory. And our prayer can be, Lord, revive your work. We may not have understanding, but what we want is for God to work, for him to breathe his spirit, for him to bring revival in a great way upon us. We listened in the song this morning, Spread the Word. We have a work to do of spreading the word. But in the midst of spreading the word, we can hand out great controversies. We can do evangelistic meetings. We can do Bible studies. We can do all of these good things that we need to do and that God calls us to do. But yet at the end of the day, it's only the Holy Spirit being poured out that is really going to make it effective. It's only God bringing revival to us and to those that we're ministering to that is really going to produce fruit in the long run. We may struggle why we don't see results. We may have questions, but inevitably our position is to be, Lord, I see your greatness. And Lord, revive your work. Pour your spirit upon us. I want to read a statement that is directly, it's from Signs of the Times. And she's writing about camp meetings, actually. And she says, let us arouse as one man and unitedly call upon God to send down his grace upon the souls of his people and to revive his work in the midst of the years. Here she is quoting from Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 2. And she says, let us arouse as one man. Let us unitedly call upon God to send his grace upon his people and to revive his work. And so in this time of prayer, I want us to remember to pray that the Lord will send his spirit, that he will revive his work, that our unanswered questions may be stilled, but that God may be exalted, and we may plead with him to bring that revival, bring that outpouring of his spirit, and that he will work with each of these great controversies that's handed out, with each of our witnessing effort, that God will make it effective. And so that's my prayer this morning, that he will revive his work and give us that confidence and assurance that Habakkuk had in trusting in our God.